10, live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Oyato.
Hello and welcome. Tonight is the start of a new dawn in Nigeria as President Jonathan hands over licenses to PHCN successor companies, says things will get better from now on. PHCN workers threaten to stop new owners from taking over unless federal government pays all entitlements due to them. The challenge of national security is our focus tonight as we continue our series on assessment of the nation's performance since independence. And at least 50 people killed in multiple car bomb blasts in Baghdad, the Iraqi capital.
On business news tonight, the Nigerian Stock Exchange introduces new rules, demands biometric identification from investors.
And on sports news tonight, alarm bells are ringing at Old Trafford. Manager David Moyes struggles to fit into the big shoes left by Alex Ferguson at Manchester United.
It's a new beginning in Nigeria's history as the president today put aside his regular schedule to personally attend to the landmark handover of the PHCN to successor companies with an assurance that things can only get better from now on. President Jonathan says this current process of privatization is the most transparent in the history of the country. Our State House correspondent Chukwu Maonekwusi covered the handover in Abuja.
It is the peak of ongoing reforms in the power sector, and it attracted not just the owners of the PHCN successor companies, but government officials and key players in the sector. At the last count, 15 companies are sold. They include 6 generation companies and 9 distribution companies. Nigeria's president and the vice president, assisted by ministers, hand over the licenses and certificates to the chief executive officers of the PHCN successor companies as they file out one after the other. In what looks like an answer to the protests and criticisms that followed the privatization program, the president has a word for those who are not easily amenable to change.
Even if the change will benefit people, who will say, let us see the benefit first. And sometimes the change has to take place before the benefits, but they say, no, let's see the benefit before the change. People are always reluctant for changes.
Yes, change is a constant, but what happens to staff of PHCN whose severance allowances are yet to be paid?
I want to assure all our people that things can only get better from this point onwards. It's important to say to our labor partners, who we know to be patriotic Nigerians, that they should not notch a feeling of displacement, but dwell on the tremendous possibilities which the revitalization of the sector holds for them and indeed the future of this country.
Speaker after speaker praised the doggedness of the president in the privatization process.
The new owners of the generation companies are expected to build the capacity from the present level of performance to additional 5,000 megawatts within a period of 5 years.
I should add that the slight delay in completing all the payment is due to the large number of workers, large sums involved, and the need to take all needed caution to ensure proper implementation before the eventual physical handover of the companies.
The challenges in the power sector cannot be tackled without adequate finance and gas supply.
Many of the experts here described what has happened as unprecedented in the history of the country. They are optimistic that Nigerians will begin to reap the benefit in the shortest possible time. Chukuma Onrekusi, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, the chosen successor companies to the PHCN have given the assurance that the handover process would not lead to a huge increase in electricity charges. Officials of the companies who spoke at the formal handover of licenses in Abuja promised that Nigerians would enjoy the benefit of the privatization process in the next 2 years. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuke reports.
It has been described and recognized as perhaps one of the most ambitious reform programs ever embarked upon by the government. The handover of licenses to winners of the bids for the power holding company of Nigeria have received applause and criticisms over its effect on Nigerians. However, owners of the successor companies assure there is no reason to panic.
I don't think necessarily it will get expensive, but in any way, anything good is normally expensive. Anything good, they will be assured of reliable power supply, no fluctuations.
The investors sought to drive home the points that the assets would now be better managed to make up for the failures by the government over the years.
The way that we do it and the way that we demonstrate performance and profitability with transparent, reliable accounting and financial statements, I think is an essential part.
Basically, all the workers are going to be trained by, the various investors and companies coming from abroad that have experience in handling the power sector and the power plants.
Some of the new owners equally re-echoed the assurance made by the presidency that the balanced regulatory framework to guarantee the success of this achievement would not be tampered with. But they also advised the government to continue in transparency to prevent drawbacks.
This initiative fits in very nicely with the President Obama's Power Africa initiative, in which we have pledged to work with several governments, including Nigeria's, over the next 5 years to double the power of sub-Saharan Africa.
I assure you that it will be competitive. There will be more production. Once there is more production, more people will employ, more disposable income will be available, and people will know the difference.
As the presidency moves to implement more optimistic goals for the power sector, it is hoped that the country would fully embrace a world-class privatization program that would finally assuage the suffering of all Nigerians. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Well, not everyone appears to be excited about this process, as the National Union of Electricity Employees of Nigeria has embarked on a warning protest against the handover. At one of the protests in Abuja, the workers said their severance and entitlements ought to have been paid before the handover. Holding placards with different inscriptions, the workers also warned investors to stay away from the power installations for now until their demands are met.
Now that doubts have been doused on the privatization of the unbundled firms of the PHCN, the workers say trouble and more trouble have just begun. This is because there are insinuations that some of them would be laid off despite unpaid entitlements.
The agreement was made in June 2012. And as we're talking to you today, they have not fulfilled that promise and agreement. There they are, signing an investor to take over. Is it possible?
These are staff of the Ondo unit of PHCN. They have resorted to prayers and gospel warfare songs against the federal government. All they want is a payment of their entitlements. The story is the same in Kogi State. The Christian and Muslim PHCN workers have come under one umbrella to pray, not for a change of mind by the federal government, but for their severance entitlements to be paid. It's the same situation in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, the seat of government. The workers have warned new owners of the distribution and generating firms to stay clear from the PHCN facilities across the nation.
As we are addressing you now, only about 25% of PHCN staff have so far received their severance package.
The same scenario is also witnessed in Lagos.
This is a challenge! This is a challenge! Another challenge! Double challenge!
And Kaduna. The Casual workers are demanding a total clearance of all labor-related issues before they let go of the electricity company. Their demands range from the implementation of payment of retirement saving fund to pension fund administration, remittance of 2% union deductions, implementation of 10% equity share, payment of retirees, and regularization of casual workers. And for the next coming days, as it concerns electricity supply, your imagination is as good as mine. Prt1, Chiogo, Channels Television News.
Now, after many years of state monopoly, power supply in Nigeria has now been handed over to private firms which have completed the required process. But the question on the lips of many, however, is how will this move help improve power supply in the country? In this report, our correspondent Olu Phillips looks at the journey so far.
It was long coming, but eventually it's happening. For a journey that significantly witnessed a major shift in 2005 when the Electricity Reforms Act came on stream, Nigeria's electricity generation and supply has seen transformation from Electricity Company of Nigeria in 1950, Nigeria Electric Power Authority in 1972, and then the eventual bundling which produced Power Holding Company of Nigeria. Still, consumer apathy remained at the peak owing to frequent power cuts and high inefficiency. In 2010, in pursuance to the Act as amended, President Goodluck Jonathan inaugurated the Power Roadmap. On August 21st, 2013, 3 years after that action, the 75% balance payment was made to federal government by the preferred bidders, and that signaled a seismic shift from public to private ownership. Now we have new owners. Essentially, power will be generated and sold by private companies, though the Nigeria Electricity Regulation Commission will and should regulate excessive pricing, but that in itself raises the first challenge on the hearts of consumers. Which should come first? Many argue improved power or increased tariff. Many homes and businesses are still without prepaid meters, so power supplied may not be properly priced.
Higher tariff is okay to have a steady light.
For quick return on investment, operators may cut cost of operation, which entails scaling down on workforce, or simply rolling out operation in areas that are most profitable, leaving out a critical mass.
If we have to get transformers from Japan or whatever, we need to pay 100% before we can even get those. So those are some of the things that will challenge us.
The consumers will start to experience something close to stability in terms of power the next 2 years, but then it will be expensive.
The biggest issue so far has been severance and fear of loss of job.
If they complete this thing tomorrow, I think we should be able to tidy it up. But should they drag, it will not be possible for you to ask somebody to go when you have not paid him, or to ask him to see the new owner when the old person owing him is running away.
The federal government has realized close to $3 billion from the sales of power assets. The argument is, why is there still so much to be cleared in terms of severance? All may appear reasonably okay with the roadmap, but it's not yet a plug-and-play situation. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
In part 2, after the break, our special focus on security as Nigeria marks 53 years of independence. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.